Ever had the experience of being in the NICU? Because, yeah, if you have and you're here, welcome. I hope that you will share your story down below with other people that are probably seeking to get some kind of guidance. When I had my experience, I really didn't get a lot of information. I was searching to see if anybody was talking about what they went through and how I could navigate the whole entire experience. I didn't find a lot of information. So hopefully this would be helpful to you if you are trying to figure this whole thing out. I just want to share my story after having an unassisted home birth and you get transferred. If you've ever had a baby at home and you get transferred to the hospital, 9 out of 10 times you might end up in the NICU. And this was what happened to me. So, if you followed my story, I talked about when I had my baby. So, when I had my daughter, she was breech. So, imagine having a breech baby at home, and I have a doula. So, my doula, uh, she was a little bit uncomfortable, for lack of better words. She was scared. She was worried. She hasn't had this before. She's never had a breech birth, and she didn't see it coming. I'm sure if she knew it was breech, she probably wouldn't be here, to be honest. So I suspected that the baby was breech because the baby, I've had a breech baby before, and also monitoring from where I felt the feet more so and the head. I felt like I felt the feet more down my pelvis, like I felt a lot more flutter and movement. So I knew that the baby was breech, but I kept hoping the baby was going to turn, but the baby never turned. But I wasn't worried about having a breech baby because, as far as I was concerned, it's an alternate form of natural birth. Women have had breech births for centuries. Like, I don't know why in this new age we get so caught up with what is normal, what is expected, what you're supposed to, blah, blah, blah. Needless to say, when the baby came and she took a little while coming out because we had to navigate or maneuver her shoulders to pretty much get her out. So I had to change positions a couple of times to kind of help her. And the doula was helping turn her somehow to see if we can get her to come out. And in that whole process, she called 911. Well, she had my husband call 911 because she was worried that the baby's going to come out too late. And because the head is what was stuck, not the feet, she was worried that the baby was not going to be breathing by the time the baby came out. So, if you've ever, oh my Lord, if you've ever been through this, you know how traumatic it is. I felt like a wild animal. I don't know what other way to put it because my baby, I felt like my baby was ripped away from me and I was so helpless. What I wanted to do was jump and snatch this baby from this man. I don't know you, you don't know me. You show up, you don't even ask questions. You literally clip the baby and took the baby away. It was a 2 second thing. There was no conversation. Where's the baby? Where are you? Are you okay? Yes. Clip, took the baby. And he was gone. And then, other of the paramedics were there asking questions, but they try to resuscitate the baby essentially because literally they walk in as soon as the baby came out. So as soon as she came out, and sometimes, which I've seen this in many videos, I know that this happens. Sometimes when a baby comes out, you have to tap, like growing up, I know you flip the baby, you tap the baby, to get the baby blood flow and get the air into their lungs so that they could take that deep breath and start screaming. Like that's normal. Well, I never had that chance because as soon as my baby came out, they were right in there and they grabbed the baby and took the baby away. And then they transferred me to a different hospital. So they transferred the baby to uh, obviously a children's hospital, and then they transferred me to like an adult hospital, but where they deal with pregnancy and maternity and motherhood and OBs, that space. Because my placenta hadn't come out yet, which, again, as soon as that baby came out, they grabbed the baby. And so I didn't have a chance to even allow my body to relax so that the placenta would contract and come out. This was all like a movie. It happened so fast. So I was taking in, I went through my own trauma of them trying to get this placenta out, the threats and everything that took place in the hospital. And once I left the hospital, I came home. So they took me in, I think about 8 a.m. And around maybe 1, they released me because I didn't want to stay after the placenta. Because first they wanted to take me into surgery, do all these. They were threatening that I had to get this thing out within seconds. I was bleeding. I had so much pool of blood under me. Like they did all these, Lord, all these procedures, all these people standing over me, tense. Like there was about 10 people. They were standing over me, just trying to get. It's like you have these students, and then you have the doctor, and you have the nurses, and you have the interns. Like everybody was standing there trying to get this thing out of me, essentially. And right when I finally was ready to consent for them to go through the surgery, because they pretty much were yelling at me and telling me all kinds of things, and I wasn't budging because I'm like, I'm not interested in any of your interventions. I just want to go home, or I just want to go to my baby. Like, I don't want to be here. I feel like I'm trapped. I'm taken under duress, out of my own will. I'm not interested in being in your hospital. So finally, they released me and let me go around at 2 o'clock. So remember, I was up all night. My water broke around midnight. I had the baby maybe around 6 a.m. or so, 7 a.m. I don't know, somewhere around there. So this whole shebang, I hadn't rested. So I came home and took a nap. I woke up maybe around 4 or 5 o'clock, and I told my husband to take me to the hospital to go see the baby. She's in the NICU. Okay, I get to the hospital because now I want to know what's going on or what's been going on. So the big thing happened. Big, big thing happened. So to avoid YouTube channel or my video being blocked or what have you, I'm not gonna refer to the V word rather. But I get there and they tell me, oh, my daughter got the candy. I said, what? You can't do that without my consent. Because with every other child, I was right there. So that didn't happen. But in this case, I wasn't there. And they tell me, oh, we called you and you didn't pick up, and we did what was best for the child. I'm like, what was best for the child? You get to decide what was best for my child. Okay. So it was Hep B and vitamin K. That's all she got at this point. And they wanted to know because Hep B is time sensitive and vitamin K, and then they use uh, um, the ointment for her eyes, the antibiotic, which I never consent to because none of my other kids has had any of this. And everybody has their own views, opinions, beliefs, and values. For me, it's multifaceted, and we can always have this conversation another time. But for today, we're focused on transfer to the NICU and what happened. So I was very upset, and I said, I don't want you giving my child anything ever again without me signing off on it. said, okay, well, we didn't respond and they needed to make sure. But you have 24 hours. You're supposed to make sure that you get this injection within 24 hours. It's not been 24 hours. So you had no reason to say it was time sensitive and you had to make a decision. You didn't have to. But you did because that's just your procedure. And I'm sure you looked at my file and you knew that I had declined in the past. So you did what you thought needed to be done. And it's better to apologize than to ask for permission, right? So, okay. First things first, they resuscitated the baby on the way to the NICU. As this is what I'm hearing. I'm finding out when I got to the NICU because I didn't know any of this. I was in my own hospital room trying to figure my own self. And then after they resuscitated the baby, they intubated her. Okay. So basically, they put a tube in so they can feed her through the tube. And they have all these, you know, needles in, and pretty much this baby is tied down. But worst of it is she is on a cooling bed, they call it. Why is my baby on a cooling bed? What is a cooling bed? Again, where I come from, you do not put a baby, a newborn baby, in any cold space because the tummy is not cold. So you're supposed to protect that baby and keep them warm for as long as possible, like for months, weeks. You stay in a very warm space, a dark, warm room. Like that's how I've treated my babies in the past. I try to keep them as warm as possible because they have to adjust to this new world. Like they're not familiar with this. Well, my baby's on a cooling bed. What the hell? Okay, what is this supposed to do? Well, because she had to be resuscitated, they were worried that she had some kind of brain damage. So this is a way to help them check and see if she's okay. So she's going to be on this cooling bed for 72 hours. And during this 72 hours, she's given morphine to help um, keep her sedated. That way, she doesn't do a lot of moving. She's gonna stay put. And then they feed her sugar water through this tube, and therefore, I'm not allowed to feed her or give her anything. So one, I can't touch her because she has tubes all over her. She's tied to this cold 30-degree bed and she's drinking sugar water. This is her first meal. Um, okay. And then they were giving her antibiotics. I'm like, what is the antibiotic for? Because she's intubated, um, we have to avoid risk of infection. I'm like, stop. We're not doing that. I wanted to stop the morphine, but they pushed against it. So I think we agreed on. They gave her the antibiotic the first day, and they stopped. They didn't do the antibiotics again, and then I don't remember the name of the antibiotic honestly. And then they also stopped the morphine, I think, after the second day. I don't remember fully, but I know she was on morphine. And either they stopped it or lowered the dose. It's one or the other. Okay, so she has to be on this thing for 3 days. So I found myself a pillow and a blanket. I pulled the sofa bed and I moved in. Mhm. I did not leave the hospital. I only come home, take a shower, and go right back every day. I did not leave the hospital because I didn't trust them not to do any shady business behind my back again. Because they, the next day, they gave a pacifier when I left. And I was like, I signed the papers and I said, no pacifier. Oh, we're sorry. Like it's those kind of little sneaky stuff that made me just feel like I need to stay there and oversee everything that's happening. So I went on rounds with the doctors. I listened to the clinical case and what the next plan is. And if I don't agree with the plan, I tell them, no, I do not agree with this plan. We have to stop or change it or not incorporate it. I did this for the entire time my daughter was in the NICU. I did not leave and I did not miss one round. I was there every day. Um, so by the third day, it was uneventful. They were feeding her. I couldn't stop them. They have their own algorithm. So, I mean, I've done rounds before. I've worked in a hospital. So I know the the procedure. However, I also am very aware that I have to advocate for myself and my baby. I can't just leave them to their vices. By the third day, my baby's oxygen level kept dropping. So it kept dropping, like it would go all the way down to 40. And now they are worried and they are trying to now tell me that something else is wrong with her and they need to do all kinds of tests and pull all kinds of blood and do all kinds of scans. And worst off, they wanted to put her on antibiotics. Like I'm truncating this whole story into a short version, but this happened over the rounds. We were rounding, and this is the plan because the baby's oxygen level kept dropping, and they're not sure why. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not sure why? This baby is so weak and lethargic, and she's so cold. She's dying because she doesn't want to be in this environment. It so happened that it was day 48, so this is around that towards the end of the whole cooling process because I don't know how I could have stopped them if she started this immediately. They had all this stuff they wanted to do to her. I'm like, don't do anything. There's nothing wrong with her. She's cold. That's what is wrong. She's cold. You need to stop this cooling. Well, we can't stop the cooling. We have to finish up the whole course. Okay, fine. Throughout that night, her oxygen level kept dropping. And they kept, by morning, they were all panicky. The other thing about this whole experience is every 3 hours, someone shows up to come and change the baby. So, mind you, I just had a baby and I'm sleeping here in this NICU. I know you might think I'm psycho, like you need to go home and rest. I'm like, no, I cannot rest. I cannot rest. My baby is in the hands of I don't know who. So, um, I didn't get much of any rest throughout this whole process because I was woken up every 3 hours. And during the day, they were in and out, and there's beeps all the time, all everywhere. So, but I signed up for it, you know? Like I'm not complaining. I'm just stating that this is what happened because I chose to do this. I could have gone home and rested and just let them call me and tell me what the updates are. I just chose not to do that. So Essentially, by the third day, they were supposed to start the warming up. So, warming is 6 hours, and then pretty much it's 24 hours, but they warm her up for 6 hours, and then they try to maintain it over the next um, couple of days, increasing the temperature a little bit more until we're up to room temperatures and we're good. And her body is maintained at the optimal temperature. Well, even during the warming period, her oxygen kept dropping. And now they wanted to basically tell me, well, see, she's no longer cold and she's still having this issue. So it's not the cold. I'm like, have you ever been out in the snow and you ran into the house and you dip your hand in hot water? I have, because my African behind had no idea that you're not supposed to do that. And I cried because it was horrible. The pain was intense. So you can't go from this cold to this heat. Like we went from 30 degrees to near 80 degrees and expect that the person has no reaction. And if they react, something is wrong with them. I'm like, whose idea is this? But, anyways, um, the cooling process went well. That first day, we still had kept having issues with her oxygen level, and they were going to give it another day and see. And then they came up with this idea of a pick line. So a pick line is usually used if um, you can't use the umbilical cord basically any longer. Like if you are not able to feed the baby, because right now everything is going through her belly button. So if you can't use a belly button because it falls off, then you would use the pick line. And I declined it again because my understanding is 90% of the time they don't insert it well. They had struggle and struggle, and then this baby's already weak and sick. So they they don't have any reason to. And my goal was to take my baby home immediately. Like as soon as they're done with this heating period, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go home. Nope, not happening. This is what happened next. Once they cool you off and then they warm you up, the next thing they do is try to feed you. I've had two other babies before, and one of the things I never subscribed to is this whole schedule feeding. Because to me, it's ridiculous. A baby will feed when a baby needs to feed. I believe in just letting baby feed when they need to be. I've been breastfeeding for 6 years straight now. So trust me, I let baby feed when they want to feed. I've never had to put them, and I don't understand it, and I don't believe in it. I don't subscribe to that. If they're hungry, they'll let me know. That's my belief. Okay, so um, they now tell me that this baby needs to feed this amount of milk. I think we were supposed to start with 3 ounces per feeding, something like that. One ounce, I think. We started with 1 ounce or 0.5 ounce, somewhere 0.5 to 1. This is a year and a half ago, so it's a bit blurry. So we started with I think we're supposed to do 5 ounces the first day, and then 10, and then 15, like per feeding. And then they wanted her to be consuming at least 70 to 80 ounces before we can leave the hospital. So there's two challenges. Number one, when we got to the hospital, I can't touch my baby. I can't feed my baby. I can't do anything with baby. And so they encouraged me to pump. And I'm supposed to be pumping every 3 hours when she's supposed to eat, so that I would build enough milk, and also I can be, um, I will have sufficient supply when she starts eating. Well, one, it doesn't really work like that in real life, which means very few people start producing milk immediately after they have a baby. It takes 3 days, sometimes 5 days, before your milk comes through. Okay. And this baby has been in the NICU at this point about 5 days, because 3 days is just to cool her up, and then another day of just trying to warm her up, and then we start feeding. Okay, so this is day five. Um, I've pumped, but I'm stressed, I'm exhausted, and I'm not making milk because my body, so I'm making an ounce, 5 ounces if I'm lucky. That's about the most I was able to make. And I'm not waking up every 3 hours to pump. So I pump as much as I can pump. So I was producing milk, but obviously not enough. So they're telling me that I haven't made enough milk, and my baby has to consume however many ounces of milk in a day. Excuse me. And I only have just a fraction of that. Like, I had enough milk for, I think, the first day or two, and then I didn't have any milk, or whatever I was making was not enough to meet the required supply, because I'm supposed to feed her 5 ounces every feeding, and that means about 5 ounces times eight or what have you. I don't know. I can't do the math. And right now I'm producing half of it. So I have two options. I can either use donor milk, or I can use formula. And I opted for donor milk because I've never fed my babies formula, and I don't want to start now. And of course, I had to see the social worker because I wasn't really cooperative. I wasn't letting them just treat my baby how they felt like they needed to treat the baby. They wanted to put her on some anti-anxiety. I'm like, nope. They wanted to give her antibiotics. I said, nope. They wanted to do all these procedures. I said, nope, we're not doing anything. We're doing the barest minimum. We're doing whatever we have to do, and that's it. So, God so kind, after she came through, um, they did the scan. Excuse me. They did the scan, and her brain was fine. And so these are the two things. First, most NICU babies are preemies. My baby was not preemie. My baby was a normal, healthy child. And secondly, um, I haven't exposed her to really anything. This is her first real experience. So I don't take anything. So she hasn't been exposed to anything through me, essentially, is what I'm saying. So, uh, what happened? So they did the scan. There's no seizures, because the whole essence of heating and cooling is to check the brain waves. So they're gonna check for signs of seizure. So they have to do like a scan of her brain to make sure there's nothing wrong. They wanted to give her some anti-anxiety, because they say most kids, when they go into the CAT scan, they do a lot of shaking and they're not stable. I'm like, no, let's not do it. I'm not signing up for it. They're like, okay, can you at least agree if we go and she's not um, relaxed, then we will have to, because we have to have this information, we have to do this. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave the hospital. So I consented to that. I said, only if it's absolutely necessary. And the rounding nurse I had was really, really understanding, because I think she had young babies too, and she was also in the NICU. So she was very understanding of the fact that I didn't want a lot of intervention. And so she sat with me and talked to me. She's like, I know what you're dealing with. I've been down this road before. and I'm gonna try my best to be, an advocate for you, which I appreciated. Um, but the doctor, the rounding doctor was an A. He just he couldn't understand why I would challenge anything that him, as smart as he is suggesting. So, then the news traveled that, oh, she's a pharmacist. So um, she understands this verbiage. So then they would be using, because first they would use all this big grammar, like they're using these vernaculars, thinking I'm not understanding what they're saying. Like, I understand you. I just don't agree with you. I'm not stupid, you know. But, anyways, that's by the way. The nurse was nice, and she was the one that took her in for the scan. Everything went well. Everything was fine. I then have to go to the next level. I agreed to the donor milk, so she's getting the amount of milk that she needs. I try to feed her myself as much as possible, but every now and then I would say, you guys can go ahead and feed her. But I typically do all of the work. Like, they did nothing. I change her, I feed her, I do everything. I'm there. Um, they come in, they check the vitals, and they leave. That's it. They don't do anything for my baby. I do everything for her. Every now and then when they come in the middle of the night and I don't feel like moving, I'll let them do it. And then by day 6, they took the tubes out because she was responding well. And then they allow me to sit her and breastfeed her, so that at least this was the first time I could hold my baby since I had her. With all my other kids, like, they never leave my sight, and I held them as soon as I birthed them. This time around, my baby was snatched from me, and I did not hold her till day 6. At this point, she was feeding well, she was eating all her food, she was good. I'm like, okay, she's warm, her oxygen level has normalized. We're not having any of that issue again, obviously, as I suspected. Once our body stabilized, the temperature was good, everything normalized. So, can I go ahead and take my baby home now? No, you can't. Your baby would have to poop first. Like, y'all gotta be kidding. Okay, so the baby had to have a bowel movement because before I would be allowed to leave the hospital. I said, okay, that's fine. So now I went into Christendom because I was like, God, like, I had to pray, Lord, make something happen. I cannot stay here any longer. I am exhausted, and this girl is exhausted, and nothing is stopping us. She is healthy. She is well. There's nothing wrong with my baby. She's normal weight. Her body weight was up. She was born 7'2". By the time we left to the hospital, she was 7'8". Her weight was fine. She's regained her weight back, and some, because they're overfeeding her. But I digress. Everything looked fine. Now, babe, you gotta let some of this food out so we can go home. So day 7, after the rounding, they're like, everything looked good. We're all good to go. As soon as she has a bowel movement, we'll be able to release you, except if something comes up. We're still watching our oxygen levels, blah, blah, blah. And we took her off all, she's not taking anything. She's just on breast milk at this point. So I get to pick her up and breastfeed her and put her back down. Like, she doesn't take anything else. And then we have the bottle as backup. If for some reason she feels like they feel like she's not full, then we'll use a bottle. Otherwise, we stop using the bottle, which I'm grateful for because I don't really do bottles. I don't do pumping. I don't like pumping. I think it's painful and stressful. So I've always just done on demand feeding. So anyway, that same morning, my baby had a bowel movement. Hallelujah. I was so happy. I'm like, okay, she's got the bowel movement. Let's go. And that's how I left. Because as soon as she had the bowel movement, I called the nurse. They changed her. They waited. And then they're like, well, she had to have this many wet diapers. Well, she had the amount of wet diapers. She had the amount of poop they needed. They signed the release that same day. On the seventh day, I left the hospital. So they never had to put a PIC line. My baby didn't have to stay beyond a week. And we came home. That girl slept for at least 3 months. And when I say that, I mean it. Like, she was mentally exhausted. She would sleep for 18 hours. Like, she would sleep where I'm so scared, I'm checking. But I don't believe in waking babies up. So I just let her sleep. Like, I would, she would just move around. I'll feed her, I'll put her back, she'll go back to sleep. Like, she stayed asleep. I was like, is this normal? What is wrong with my child? This girl, now, I wish she would sleep for 4 hours straight. And she's a year and a half. Okay. But yeah, she slept and slept and slept. And I am 100% sure it's because of the traumatic experience that she had. Her body needed to recover. And they kept talking me out of breastfeeding, telling me, NICU babies don't latch very well. They don't think she's going to latch. They kept having issues with my latching. And that's a video for another day. We really have to talk about the issues women go through with breastfeeding because you tell yourself you're not producing enough milk. They convince you that you don't have enough milk, and then you start worrying about they're not latching well, or they're latching horribly, or they it's too painful, it's too this. Yes, you go through all of that, but most of the time all of that passes. My daughter is thriving. She's 16 months now. She's walking, she's blobbing, she's very alert and engaged. So it turned out to be a happy story. And I know this is not the story for everyone. And a lot of people that end up in the NICU stay there for 2, 3, 4 weeks. I'm so grateful that I made it out in a week. But I know the biggest part of it is the fact that I stayed on their case and I did not allow them to overstimulate, and I didn't just trust their judgment because they would have just taken their time and let her sit there and given her the bill ended up being $100 or some thousand, for these 7 days. So can you imagine what you would pay if you stayed there? I mean, people are paying millions. Granted, it's not coming out of your pocket, but I'm just saying, like, there's some capitalism associated with this. Let's just keep this baby in the NICU for a month, 2 months, sometimes 3 months. You're in the NICU. I know that there are cases where it's necessary. When you have a preemie, when you have a baby that's born at 6 months, is born at, you know, 7 months or what have you, they have lung issues, they have heart issues. I totally get it. But majority of cases, I don't know if that's what it is. In my case, the doctor was 150% sure I wasn't going to be out of there in 7 days. He told me, you need to relax. You're going to be here for at least 14 days. He literally said that, you know, but I was out in 7 because everything worked out in my favor. And that's because I stayed persistent and I stayed focused and I did nothing but advocate for myself and my child. I wasn't going to let anybody else bully me or talk me out of it. And I was willing to make that heavy, heavy, heavy sacrifice of just allowing myself to sit there and not getting the proper rest that I really should have gotten, which I always make sure I get when I have a baby. when I came back home, I certainly took the time to rest as much as I could, you know. But, anyways, this was my story um, about this was my experience with having my baby. Trust our intuition and do our part to make sure that we give the best to ourselves and to our babies. If this was helpful to you in any way, please share and like and subscribe to my channel. And also, if you've had a similar experience, share your story. You don't know who this is going to impact and which life will be changed from this experience. I wish you success in your pregnancy if you are pregnant, and if you are struggling with this same experience, I hear you, I see you, and trust me, you will get through it. I know how deeply wounded you may feel right now, but all of it is going to pass because you can do the impossible and you can handle way more than you think you can. If anyone had told me I could sleep in the NICU for 7 days and not even be bothered, given the fact that I just had a baby and really just need to lay in my bed and rest, I would have told them differently. But I did it, and I did it. I call it a sacrifice of love. Thank you so much. If you made it to the end of this video, you are the real MVP. Keep thriving.